London, January 1814. The season's most eligible duke. A lady who loves the stars more than society. One wrong carriage. One desperate scheme. And one truth that could destroy everything. Lady Ariana Fairfax never imagined that fleeing an unwanted suitor would lead her to the wrong carriage, and into the carefully laid plans of Lady Georgiana Cavendish, a young woman determined to orchestrate her brother's romantic future. The Duke of Devonshire, brilliant and isolated, has buried himself in astronomical research and duty since his father's death, forgetting how to simply be a man who deserves happiness. What begins as manipulation transforms into something achingly real when Ariana meets Edward at the Royal Society and discovers a kindred spirit, someone who sees the stars the way she does, who values her mind as much as her beauty. But their connection is built on a foundation of secrets. And when Ariana must choose between keeping those secrets or risking everything for the truth, she'll learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is be honest. This is a story about the courage it takes to be vulnerable. About finding yourself again after loss. About the transformative power of honesty, even when that honesty threatens to destroy your only chance at happiness. Some love stories begin with a lie. The best ones are reborn in truth. Stay with us through the last word, and discover how a wrong carriage led to exactly the right destination. The January frost had transformed London into something both beautiful and treacherous, a glittering cage where every breath turned to mist and every misstep could send one sliding across ice-slicked cobblestones. Inside the Mayfair residence of Lord and Lady Granville, hundreds of candles fought against the winter darkness, their flames reflected in champagne glasses and diamond necklaces until the entire ballroom seemed to shimmer. Lady Ariana Fairfax could taste the champagne gone sour in her mouth. She pressed herself against the crimson damask wallpaper, the pattern of twisted vines and roses digging into her spine through her sapphire silk gown. The stays of her corset felt too tight, crushing her ribs, making each breath a struggle. Or perhaps that was simply fear. "My dearest Lady Ariana." The voice slithered across her skin like something cold and wet. "Surely you'll not deny me the honor of escorting you to supper. I've been most patient. Most generous with my attentions these past weeks." Viscount Henry Montague materialized before her like a spectre emerging from fog. 52 years old if he was a day, with teeth yellowed by too much tobacco and fingers that trembled, not from age, Ariana suspected, but from the port he consumed like water. His third wife had died under what the papers delicately termed mysterious circumstances just 6 months prior. The woman had been 26. Ariana was 23. Apparently, she was next. "Viscount Montague, I find myself quite faint." She pressed one gloved hand to her temple, trying to inch toward the terrace doors without seeming to flee. "The heat in here is oppressive. Perhaps if I could just. Then permit me to assist you to somewhere more private." His clammy hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her wrist like a manacle. His breath, when he leaned close, reeked of port and something darker, tobacco mixed with the sweet rotten scent of taxidermied flesh. She'd heard he collected stuffed birds. The thought made her stomach lurch. Ariana didn't think. Didn't plan. Didn't consider the consequences. She yanked her arm free with enough force to send Montague stumbling back, grabbed her velvet cloak from the chair behind her, and ran. Her silk slippers skidded on the polished marble as she flew through the terrace doors. Behind her, she heard Montague's outraged sputtering, then his voice rising above the assembly's murmur, "Lady Ariana! Lady Ariana, come back this instant! Your father shall hear of this. Such disgraceful behavior!" The terrace stairs were treacherous, slick with ice that gleamed like glass in the lamplight. Ariana felt her ankle twist on the second step, pain lancing up her leg, but she didn't dare slow down. Her gown caught on something, she heard fabric tear, felt the cold air hit her stockinged calf. Scandalous. Ruinous. She didn't care. The gasps and whispers from the ballroom followed her down like a flock of carrion birds. "Did you see, Lady Ariana Fairfax, running like a common, her father will be mortified, poor Viscount Montague, such an eligible match, she'll never recover from this scandal." The street below teemed with carriages, their lanterns casting pools of warm gold through the swirling fog. Horses stamped and snorted, their breath forming clouds that hung in the frozen air. Coachmen huddled in their greatcoats, passing flasks between them. Lady Ariana. Montague's voice echoed from above, closer now. You'll catch your death. Think of your reputation. Think of your family. Her reputation. As if she had one left to lose after this spectacle. Panic seized Ariana's throat like a fist. Without thinking, without looking, she wrenched open the door of the nearest carriage and threw herself inside, slamming it shut behind her. She collapsed against the burgundy velvet seat, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. The smell of lavender sachets and leather enveloped her. Outside, she could hear Montague's heavy footsteps descending the stairs, calling her name with increasing desperation. I do beg your pardon, came an amused female voice from the darkness across from her, but you're most certainly not John Barker, our coachman. Ariana's eyes adjusted to the dim lamplight filtering through the frosted windows. Sitting opposite her was a young woman perhaps a year or two younger than herself, with golden curls pinned beneath a fashionable bonnet trimmed in forest green ribbon. She wore a gown of burgundy velvet that looked expensive enough to feed a tenant family for a year. Her hazel eyes sparkled with barely suppressed laughter, and a leather-bound book, something scientific, from the glimpse Ariana caught of the diagrams, lay forgotten in her lap. I do apologize most sincerely. Ariana's voice came out breathless, shaking. I seem to have entered entirely the wrong carriage. There was a gentleman, you see, and I couldn't. Say no more. The young woman leaned forward, peering through the window with obvious delight. The curtain twitched aside, and Ariana saw Montague on the street now, scanning the line of carriages like a hound that had lost the scent. Good heavens, is that Viscount Montague? The one who keeps that dreadful collection of stuffed birds? I heard he has an entire room of them. Dead things with glass eyes, all staring. Despite her terror, Ariana felt a desperate laugh bubble up. The very same. You poor creature. The woman settled back with a satisfied smile, adjusting a lap blanket over her skirts. Well, you're perfectly safe now. I'm Lady Georgiana Cavendish, and this happens to be my brother's carriage. He's still trapped inside that dreadful assembly, no doubt suffering through tedious conversations about crop yields and railway investments. We were about to depart for Cavendish House in Belgravia, but I'm in no particular hurry. You're welcome to hide here until that ghastly Viscount abandons his pursuit. Lady Georgiana, I couldn't possibly impose. It's hardly an imposition. Any enemy of Viscount Montague is a friend of mine. Georgiana studied her with open curiosity. And you are? Lady Ariana Fairfax. She managed something like a curtsy, though it was difficult while collapsed against a carriage seat. My father is the Earl of Fairfax. Recognition flickered across Georgiana's face. Fairfax of Kent? My brother Edward knows your father, they served together in the House of Lords. My goodness, what a remarkable coincidence. We're practically connected already. Before Ariana could respond, Georgiana rapped smartly on the carriage ceiling with her knuckles. John Barker. His Grace will be delayed. We have a guest, Lady Ariana Fairfax. We'll drop her at Grosvenor Square before heading home. My lady, I really shouldn't. Nonsense. You'll stay right here until that dreadful Viscount stops prowling about like a wolf that's lost its prey. Georgiana settled back with obvious satisfaction. Now, while we wait for my impossibly serious brother to extract himself from whatever tedious conversation has trapped him, tell me, are you enjoying the season? Aside from fleeing unwanted suitors through ice and scandal, obviously. The question was asked with such genuine warmth, such complete lack of judgment, that Ariana felt something in her chest loosen. When was the last time someone had asked what she actually thought about anything? The season has been. Ariana searched for words. Educational. Though I confess I'm finding the entire matrimonial marketplace rather barbaric. We're paraded about like horses at Tattersall's, examined for our teeth and bloodlines. Utterly barbaric, Georgiana agreed with feeling. All those mothers circling like hawks, tallying dowries and connections. And the gentlemen strutting about like peacocks, preening and showing off their tail feathers. It's exhausting for everyone involved, and degrading besides. She paused, her expression shifting to something more thoughtful. Though I suppose it's worse for ladies. At least gentlemen can choose their battles. We must simply wait to be chosen. Or flee into random carriages when the choices become intolerable. Georgiana laughed, bright and genuine. I like you, Lady Ariana. You have spirit. So many ladies at these affairs seem half dead already, resigned to their fates. Her eyes took on a calculating gleam. Tell me, what do you truly enjoy? What interests you when you're not fleeing through terrace doors? The question caught Ariana completely off guard. No one at society events ever asked such things. They inquired whether she sang prettily, or played the pianoforte, or managed fine needlework. Never what she thought about. Never what she wanted. Ariana hesitated, then decided she had nothing left to lose. Her reputation was likely already in tatters. I enjoy natural philosophy. Particularly astronomy and mathematics. And I assist my father with his parliamentary research when he's occupied with committee work. I've been helping him draft a proposal on agricultural reform. The current system is terribly inefficient, and if we could implement rotation schedules that account for soil depletion. She stopped, flushing. Forgive me. I'm sure that's terribly dull. Dull? Georgiana's eyes had gone wide. Lady Ariana, that's extraordinary. Genuinely extraordinary. She leaned forward, and something in her expression made Ariana's wariness return. You know, my brother Edward, the Duke of Devonshire, he's passionate about the sciences. Positively obsessed. He's been funding astronomical observations at Oxford for years. He's a Royal Society member, always going on about planetary orbits and mathematical proofs, and I don't know what else. Half the time I can't understand what he's saying, but he lights up when he talks about it. That sounds. Ariana found herself genuinely interested despite her suspicion. That sounds genuinely fascinating. The work being done at Oxford on stellar parallax is revolutionary. If they can accurately measure stellar distances, it could transform our understanding of the universe's scale. See? This is exactly what I mean. Georgiana's enthusiasm seemed genuine, but there was something else beneath it. Something Ariana couldn't quite name. Edward never meets anyone who can discuss these things. Most ladies at assemblies just smile and nod when he starts talking about gravitational forces. You actually understand what he's passionate about. I've always found it strange that ladies are discouraged from scientific study, Ariana said carefully. As if having a mind somehow makes us less suitable wives. It's ridiculous, Georgiana agreed. She seemed to be studying Ariana with new intensity, as if seeing her in a different light. You know, there's a Royal Society lecture next week. Wednesday evening. My brother attends every single one. It's practically the only social event he genuinely enjoys. The other members actually talk about substantive topics rather than gossip and fashion. She pulled a small engraved card from her reticule and held it out. Ariana took it, noting the fine engraving, the official Royal Society seal. Would you like to attend? Georgiana asked. As my guest, I mean. It's open to ladies, though not many take advantage. Professor Herschel is presenting his latest findings on planetary motion. I thought. She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. I thought perhaps you'd enjoy it. And Edward would be there, of course. You could meet properly. Discuss astronomy and mathematics with someone who actually cares about such things. Ariana looked down at the invitation, then back at Georgiana's face. The younger woman's expression was warm, friendly, seemingly guileless. But Ariana hadn't survived 3 London seasons by being naive. She could sense calculation beneath the surface, though she couldn't quite determine its shape. That's very kind of you, Lady Georgiana. Though I can't help but wonder. I know it seems forward, Georgiana interrupted smoothly. We've only just met, after all. But I have a good sense about people, and I think you're someone worth knowing. Plus, she added with a mischievous smile, any lady bold enough to flee Viscount Montague through a terrace in winter is exactly the sort of person who'd appreciate a good scientific lecture. The carriage door opened suddenly, and John Barker's weathered face appeared. Lady Georgiana, His Grace sends word that he'll be another quarter-hour at minimum. Sir Thomas Littleton has cornered him regarding some mining venture in Cornwall. Georgiana groaned dramatically. Of course he has. Dreadful man. Cannot take a hint. She turned to Ariana. You see what I mean? My brother is perpetually trapped by people who want things from him. Investments, influence, introductions. He's the Duke first, Edward second. Sometimes I think he forgets he's allowed to simply be a person. Something in Georgiana's voice, genuine affection mixed with frustration, made Ariana's suspicion ease slightly. Whatever this young woman was planning, she seemed to genuinely care about her brother. Very well, John Barker, Georgiana said. We'll continue waiting. The coachman withdrew, and Georgiana turned back to Ariana with a bright smile. So? What do you say? Wednesday evening, the Royal Society lecture. A chance to hear cutting-edge astronomical research and, who knows, perhaps meet some interesting people who share your passions. Ariana looked down at the invitation in her gloved hands, then at Georgiana's eager face. This was clearly more than a simple invitation to a lecture. Georgiana had some scheme in mind, though Ariana couldn't yet determine its full scope. Something about her brother, probably. Some matchmaking design. And yet, when was the last time she'd been invited somewhere for her mind rather than her family connections? When had anyone last suggested she might have interests worth pursuing beyond embroidery and watercolors? Outside, she could still hear Montague's voice, growing fainter as he moved down the line of carriages. She thought of the morning's conversation with her father, his gentle but firm suggestion that perhaps it was time to consider more seriously the offers she'd received. She thought of going home tonight to face the social consequences of her very public flight. She thought of 3 seasons of vapid conversations and calculated courtships, of reducing herself to nothing more than her dowry and her bloodline. Perhaps a bit of madness was exactly what she needed. I'll attend the lecture, Ariana heard herself say. I make no promises beyond that. If I happen to enjoy the presentation and happen to meet your brother, then so be it. But I'm going for the astronomy, Lady Georgiana. Not for matchmaking schemes. Of course, Georgiana said, her smile widening. The astronomy. That's precisely why you should go. But her eyes sparkled with something that looked very much like triumph. Footsteps approached the carriage. Heavy, measured, masculine footsteps. Georgiana's expression shifted instantly from conspiratorial to innocent. That's Edward, she said quickly. You should probably. But before Ariana could move, the carriage door opened. She had only a moment to register the man standing there, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his fingers through it. His face was all aristocratic angles and sharp intelligence, and his eyes, pale amber in the lamplight, were the most striking she'd ever seen. Those eyes met hers for one electric second. She saw surprise flicker across his face, followed by something else. Concern? Is someone in distress? His voice was deep, cultured, with an undercurrent of genuine worry. I saw someone fleeing the Grenville Terrace. Are you injured? May I be of assistance? No, Ariana grabbed her cloak and scrambled for the opposite door, nearly falling in her haste. I must go. Thank you, Lady Georgiana. Good evening, Your Grace. She didn't wait for a response. She wrenched open the far door and half fell out of the carriage, her torn gown catching again. She heard Georgiana's laugh, bright and delighted, and the Duke's confused Georgiana, what on earth? Then Ariana was running again, this time toward her father's townhouse, the invitation clutched in her hand. Behind her, she heard the Duke's carriage pull away, its wheels crunching over ice. She stood on the empty street, breath coming in white clouds, heart still racing. She looked down at the invitation. Wednesday evening. The Royal Society. Professor Herschel on planetary motion. The Duke of Devonshire with his striking eyes and his concern for a fleeing stranger. Lady Georgiana with her schemes and her too bright smile. Ariana tucked the invitation into her bodice and started walking toward Grosvenor Square. She was absolutely mad to even consider attending. Georgiana was clearly orchestrating something, and Ariana had just agreed to play her part in it. But when she closed her eyes, she could still see the Duke's face in the lamplight. The intelligence in his eyes. The way he'd asked if she was injured before anything else. Perhaps madness was exactly what she needed. Behind her, from the direction of the Grenville residence, she could still hear voices raised in scandal and speculation. Lady Ariana Fairfax, fleeing an eligible viscount. Running through the streets like a madwoman. Ruining herself. Let them talk. She had an astronomy lecture to attend. If you're already captivated by Ariana's escape and curious about what happens when she meets the Duke properly, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support means we can bring you more sweeping romances like this one. And if you're enjoying the story so far, a quick like would truly make our day. Now, let's continue with Lady Georgiana's carefully laid plans. The letter arrived 3 days later, sealed with the Cavendish crest in midnight blue wax. Ariana held it in the morning room of her father's townhouse, watching the winter sun stream through the windows and turn the paper to gold. Mary Collins hovered nearby, pretending to arrange flowers but clearly dying of curiosity. Well? Mary finally burst out. Aren't you going to open it, my lady? Ariana broke the seal. Dearest Lady Ariana. I do hope this letter finds you well, and that the dreadful Viscount Montague has ceased his persistent attentions. I heard through the most delicious gossip channels that he cornered Lady Pemberton at the Ashworth musicale yesterday evening. Apparently she fainted, though whether from horror or calculation, opinions differ. I wanted to thank you for the delightful conversation in my brother's carriage. It is rare, vanishingly rare, to meet someone with both genuine intellectual curiosity and the courage to flee unwanted suitors through terraces in winter. You are exactly the sort of person I hoped to find. I'm writing to invite you to tea tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock at Cavendish House in Belgravia. I realize we've only just met, but I felt an immediate kinship with you. Moreover, I have something I wish to show you. Something that might interest you greatly. Regarding the Royal Society lecture, I've secured your formal membership as a guest observer. Wednesday evening, 7 o'clock. Professor Herschel is brilliant, though I warn you his lectures can run long when he gets enthusiastic. Bring a warm shawl, the lecture hall is dreadfully drafty. Do say you'll come to tea. I have so much to tell you. Yours in conspiracy and science. Lady Georgiana Cavendish. P.S. Edward asked about you. He wanted to know if the young lady who fled the Grenville Assembly was unharmed. I told him you seemed quite well, considering. He looked interested. Most unusual for my brother. Ariana read the letter twice, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. What does it say? Mary demanded. Lady Georgiana has invited me to tea. The Duke of Devonshire's sister? Mary's eyes went wide. My lady, that's quite an honor. Or quite a trap. Ariana set the letter down. She's planning something, Mary. I can feel it. Does it matter? Mary asked pragmatically. You need a respectable match, and quickly, after what happened at the Grenville Assembly. Everyone's talking about it. Lady Pemberton sent her regrets for the Ashworth musicale, claiming illness, but everyone knows it's because she doesn't want to face the gossip about you. And your father. Ariana closed her eyes. Her father had been painfully kind about the incident, but she'd seen the worry in his face. Charles Fairfax, Earl of Fairfax, was a good man who wanted his daughter happy. But he also had responsibilities. Connections to maintain. A reputation to uphold. And Viscount Montague had sent a formal letter requesting permission to call. Ariana had begged her father to refuse, and he had, for now. But for how long? I'll go to tea, Ariana decided. But I'm going with my eyes open. Whatever Lady Georgiana is planning, I won't be a pawn in it. Mary snorted. Begging your pardon, my lady, but I think you're already several moves into her game. The question is whether you're a pawn or a queen. Thursday afternoon arrived with crisp winter sunshine that made the frost-covered city gleam like a jewel box. Ariana dressed in deep plum wool, elegant but practical. Mary arranged her hair simply, and Ariana deliberately left her finest jewelry in its case. She wouldn't dress to impress. This was reconnaissance, nothing more. Cavendish House was imposing in daylight, 5 stories of pale stone in the heart of Belgravia, windows glinting like knowing eyes. The knocker was silver, cast in the shape of an astronomical symbol. Appropriate. A butler answered, ancient, dignified, with the sort of face that had seen everything and been impressed by none of it. Lady Ariana Fairfax for Lady Georgiana, Ariana said. Her ladyship is expecting you. This way, if you please. But instead of leading her to a morning room or parlor, the butler guided her up a sweeping staircase, then another, then down a corridor lined with portraits of stern Cavendish ancestors. Ariana glimpsed astronomical charts on the walls between paintings, detailed maps of the heavens, lovingly rendered. Where are we going? She finally asked. The butler's lips twitched. Might have been a smile. Her ladyship insisted on receiving you in His Grace's observatory. 3rd floor, west wing. She said you would appreciate it. The observatory. They climbed a final narrow staircase, and the butler opened a door to reveal. Ariana's breath caught. The room was circular, with windows all around that flooded it with light. But it was what filled the room that made her heart race. A massive telescope dominated the center, easily 12 feet long, mounted on a complex framework that allowed it to point in any direction. Tables lined the walls, covered with papers, calculations, diagrams, sketches of celestial objects. Star charts hung everywhere, some of them clearly ancient, others newly drawn. Books overflowed from shelves, Newton's Principia, Kepler's works, Galileo, Copernicus, and dozens of modern texts. And in the middle of it all stood Georgiana, wearing a pale blue day dress and holding a leather journal. Ariana. She beamed. Oh, do forgive the irregular location. But I thought you'd rather see this than make polite conversation over tea and biscuits in some stuffy morning room. This is. Ariana moved deeper into the room, drawn to the telescope like a moth to flame. This is extraordinary. May I? Please. Georgiana gestured expansively. Edward won't mind. He's at Parliament all afternoon. Ariana ran her hand along the telescope's smooth brass, her heart hammering with sheer want. She'd never seen an instrument like this outside of Oxford. This must have cost a fortune. 2 fortunes, actually. Edward had it commissioned from the finest maker in Germany. He used to come up here every clear night when he was younger. Before he became. Georgiana's voice trailed off. Well. Before. Ariana heard the weight in that pause. She turned to find Georgiana watching her with an expression that was part calculation, part genuine sadness. Before what? Before our father died. Georgiana set the journal down and moved to one of the windows, looking out over the snow-covered city. 10 years ago this February. Edward was barely 20. Father had a heart seizure in the House of Lords. Sudden, shocking, and, as we discovered, he'd left everything in absolute chaos. I'm so sorry, Ariana said quietly. Father was brilliant but hopelessly disorganized. He'd made investments that went sour, borrowed against properties without telling anyone, let maintenance slide for years. When Edward inherited. Georgiana's voice cracked. I was only 9, so I didn't fully understand. But I remember him working night and day. Barely sleeping. Barely eating. He fixed everything, saved the estate, restored the family's reputation. But in the process, he forgot how to be Edward. He became the Duke of Devonshire, and nothing else. Ariana felt something twist in her chest. She thought of the man she'd glimpsed in the lamplight. The concern in his voice when he'd asked if she was injured. He still comes here sometimes, Georgiana continued. Late at night when he can't sleep. I hear him up here, making calculations, adjusting the telescope. But he never just enjoys it anymore. It's like he's forgotten how to do anything without it being a duty or a responsibility. That sounds. Ariana chose her words carefully. That sounds lonely. It is. Georgiana turned back to her, and her eyes were fierce. He's desperately lonely, Ariana. And the worst part is, he doesn't even realize it anymore. He thinks this is just how life is. Endless duty, endless obligation, endless isolation. Ariana felt the pieces clicking into place. That's why you invited me here. You want to, what? Fix your brother? Cure his loneliness? I want him to remember that he's allowed to be happy. Georgiana's voice was passionate, raw with feeling. I want him to meet someone who sees him as Edward, not as the Duke. Someone who shares his passions and his interests. Someone who might make him smile again, really smile, not that polite expression he uses at assemblies. And you think I'm that someone? Ariana kept her voice neutral. I think you could be. Georgiana moved closer. I saw how you looked at this room, Ariana. How you touched that telescope. That's how Edward used to look at things before he became consumed by duty. And I saw how he looked at you in the carriage, surprised, concerned, interested. Do you know how rare that is? Edward barely notices people anymore. But he noticed you. Something in Georgiana's voice, genuine affection mixed with frustration, made Ariana's suspicion ease slightly. Whatever this young woman was planning, she seemed to genuinely care about her brother. Lady Georgiana, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but let me show you something. Georgiana picked up the leather journal she'd been holding. This is Edward's private journal. From before father died. Georgiana, I can't possibly. Just look at this one entry. Please. Against her better judgment, Ariana took the journal. Georgiana had marked a page with ribbon. Ariana opened it and read. October 15, 1813. Clear night. Observed Jupiter's moons with a new lens. Incredible clarity. Europa, Io, Ganymede, and Callisto all visible, their positions matching the calculated predictions within minutes of arc mathematics made physical. Theory made real. Sometimes I think this is the only place I'm truly happy. Up here with the stars, where everything follows predictable laws. No politics, no expectations, no disappointing anyone. Just the universe and its elegant mathematics. Father says I should spend less time with telescopes and more time learning to manage the estates. The stars won't wait on you someday, boy. But tenants and Parliament will. He's right, of course. But I wish. The entry ended there, mid-sentence. Ariana looked up to find Georgiana watching her with tears in her eyes. That's the last entry he ever made, Georgiana said softly. Father died a week later. Edward put the journal away and never touched it again. He became the perfect Duke. Responsible, serious, dutiful. He saved the family. But he lost himself. Ariana's throat felt tight. She looked around the observatory again, seeing it differently now. Not just a room full of beautiful instruments, but a mausoleum for a younger man's dreams. And you think I can somehow, what? Bring that Edward back? I think you could remind him that man still exists. Georgiana took the journal back, handling it reverently. You understand what he loves, Ariana. You speak his language. And, more importantly, you're brave enough to be honest. You fled a viscount through a terrace rather than accept something that would make you miserable. That takes courage. The kind of courage Edward needs to see in the world. Ariana moved to one of the star charts, a beautiful thing showing the winter constellations. She traced the line of Orion with one finger, thinking. What exactly are you proposing? She asked quietly. Attend the Royal Society lecture on Wednesday, Georgiana said. Edward will be there, he never misses. I'll make sure you're seated near each other. Talk to him. Just talk. About astronomy, about the lecture, about anything that interests you both. Let him see that there are people in the world who care about the same things he does. People who might understand him. And in return? Ariana turned to face her. What do you want from me, Georgiana? For the first time, Georgiana looked uncomfortable. I need Edward to trust that I can make good decisions about my own life. I'm in love, you see. With a captain in the Royal Navy, Thomas Fitzroy. He's wonderful, Ariana. Brave and kind and honorable. But Edward won't even meet with him properly. He's decided Thomas is unsuitable, too dangerous a profession, not enough income, no secure inheritance. All his objections are really just fear. Fear of losing me the way we lost father. So you want to distract your brother with me so he'll approve your match? No. Georgiana's vehemence was genuine. Or, yes. Partially. But Ariana, I truly believe you and Edward could be wonderful together. Not because it serves my purposes, but because you're genuinely compatible. You're both brilliant. Both passionate about science. Both trapped by duty and expectation. I'm not asking you to pretend anything. I'm just asking you to be yourself around him. To show him that being himself is allowed. Ariana studied the younger woman's face. There was calculation there, yes. Desperation. But also genuine affection for her brother, and, Ariana thought, genuine respect for Ariana herself. If I do this, Ariana said slowly, I do it honestly. I won't lie to your brother about who I am or what I want. If he and I connect, it will be genuine. Not based on manipulation or schemes. That's all I'm asking, Georgiana said eagerly. Just be yourself. The woman who reads about astronomy and helps her father with parliamentary reform. The woman brave enough to flee Viscount Montague. That's the woman Edward needs to meet. Ariana looked around the observatory one more time. At the telescope pointing toward heaven. At the calculations covering every surface. At the journal in Georgiana's hands, holding the last hopeful words of a young man who'd been buried under duty. She thought of her own situation. 3 seasons with no acceptable offers. Viscount Montague circling like a vulture. Her father's gentle but increasing pressure to be reasonable about marriage. The suffocating expectation that she reduce herself to dowry and bloodline, putting away her books and her calculations and her dreams of contributing something meaningful to the world. Maybe this was madness. But wasn't madness better than slow suffocation? I'll attend the lecture, Ariana heard herself say. But Georgiana, I need you to understand something. If your brother and I meet, and if we connect, it will be on honest terms. I won't build anything on deception. I understand, Georgiana said, though Ariana wasn't sure she did. Thank you, Ariana. Truly. As the butler escorted Ariana back through the house, she passed an open doorway and glimpsed a desk covered in papers. Parliamentary documents, from the look of them. Agricultural reform proposals in a strong, slanted hand. And in the corner of the desk, half hidden beneath a report on crop rotation, a small notebook filled with astronomical calculations. The Duke of Devonshire, still doing his calculations late at night when he couldn't sleep. Ariana's heart did that complicated thing again. Wednesday evening. The Royal Society. Professor Herschel on planetary motion. The Duke of Devonshire with his telescope and his loneliness and his forgotten dreams. What could possibly go wrong? The Royal Society lecture hall was everything Georgiana had promised, intellectually stimulating, mercifully free of social posturing, and filled with people who genuinely cared about scientific advancement rather than gossip and status. Ariana arrived early, her nerves fluttering despite her best efforts at composure. She wore a practical day dress of deep emerald, her hair arranged simply. No artifice, no excessive elegance. Just herself, ready to discuss planetary motion and gravitational mathematics with people who actually cared. The lecture hall was filled with displays of astronomical instruments, mathematical charts, and clusters of serious-looking gentlemen discussing observation techniques. Ariana was one of only a handful of women present, but no one seemed to find her presence unusual. The Royal Society was progressive in that respect, at least for guest observers. She drifted toward a display of planetary orbit calculations, studying the detailed drawings of elliptical paths and gravitational interactions, when a deep voice behind her said, "The mathematical elegance is particularly striking. Kepler's laws expressed through Newton's gravitational equations, it's remarkably beautiful work." Ariana turned and found herself face to face with the Duke of Devonshire. He was even more striking than her brief glimpse by the carriage had suggested. Dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his fingers through it while absorbed in calculations. Strong aristocratic features that might have been intimidating if not softened by genuinely intelligent eyes the color of warm amber. Tall and broad-shouldered in a way that suggested physical capability beneath his impeccably tailored coat. He looked at her with polite interest, clearly expecting a response to his comment about the orbital calculations. All of Georgiana's carefully provided information flooded Ariana's mind. He loves celestial mechanics. He appreciates directness. He values genuine intellectual engagement over social performance. The mathematical elegance is remarkable, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Though I wonder if Kepler's empirical observations are being given sufficient weight in the current gravitational debates. Mathematical beauty shouldn't override observed phenomena. Interest sparked immediately in his expression, exactly as Georgiana had predicted. Precisely my concern. Some of our colleagues become so enamored with mathematical proofs that they dismiss observations that don't fit their elegant equations. One cannot simply ignore empirical data because it complicates the mathematics. That would be like adjusting your observations to match your theory rather than adjusting your theory to match your observations, Ariana agreed. The fundamental purpose of science is reversed. Exactly. Edward's whole demeanor shifted, the polite mask falling away to reveal genuine enthusiasm. I've been trying to explain this to the observation committee, but they're so focused on proving Newton's universal gravitation that they're not considering alternative explanations for certain anomalies. They talked easily for several minutes about planetary motion, about the challenges of astronomical observation, about the tension between mathematical elegance and empirical reality. Edward was articulate and passionate, his expertise obvious in every comment. And Ariana realized with a start that she wasn't following Georgiana's script at all. She'd forgotten about the carefully prepared information, forgotten about strategic conversation management. She was simply talking to someone who shared her genuine interests, who valued her opinions and built on her ideas rather than dismissing or patronizing her. This was what she'd been missing all season. Real conversation. Intellectual engagement. Recognition as a thinking person rather than a decorative potential wife. Have you read Newton's Principia? Edward asked, his eyes alight with genuine interest. 7 times, Ariana said automatically, then froze. Edward's eyes sharpened, and for a moment, amusement flickered across his face. 7 times. That's remarkably specific. And remarkably similar to my own reading history of the text. Ariana's heart hammered. She'd slipped. Used information Georgiana had given her without thinking. I meant that I've read it multiple times. 7 was simply an estimate. An estimate that happens to be exact? Edward's tone was teasing, but there was something sharper beneath it. Something knowing. What a curious coincidence, Lady Fairfax, she managed. Lady Ariana Fairfax. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by something warmer. Fairfax, is your father the Earl of Fairfax? He is. I serve with him in the Lords. Excellent mind for policy, particularly regarding agricultural reform. Edward smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. Though he's never mentioned having a daughter interested in celestial mechanics and gravitational theory. How have we never met at any parliamentary gatherings? Father tends to discuss grain yields and crop rotation when he attends social functions. He doesn't usually advertise my unusual interests, Ariana admitted, grateful for the change of subject away from her suspicious knowledge of his reading habits. Most people find discussions of planetary orbits decidedly unladylike. Then most people are fools. The words came out immediate and emphatic. Edward looked slightly embarrassed by his own vehemence. What I mean is, intelligence and education should be celebrated regardless of one's sex. The notion that ladies should confine themselves to watercolors and embroidery is absurd and wasteful of human potential. I wish more gentlemen shared your view. As do I. He gestured toward the orbital display. Have you visited the Oxford Observatory? They're conducting cutting-edge research on planetary motion using improved telescopic lenses. I haven't had the opportunity yet, though I would dearly love to. You should. The work Professor Herschel is doing with stellar parallax measurements is extraordinary. I attended a demonstration last month. He paused, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. I'm doing it again, aren't I? Monologuing about scientific minutiae while you're too polite to escape. Ariana laughed, genuinely delighted by his self-awareness. Actually, I'm fascinated. Please continue. What techniques are they using for parallax measurements? Edward's expression brightened, and he launched into a detailed explanation of stellar observation methods and parallax calculation challenges. Ariana listened, asked questions, offered her own observations. The conversation flowed naturally between them, building momentum as they discovered more shared interests and compatible viewpoints. An hour passed without Ariana noticing. They'd moved from the orbital display to a lecture on telescopic improvement, then to a demonstration of new calculation methods for predicting comet trajectories. Edward was everything Georgiana had described: passionate, intelligent, slightly awkward in social situations but completely comfortable discussing substantive topics. More importantly, he looked at her, really looked at her, as if her thoughts and opinions mattered as much as his own. Lady Ariana, Edward said slowly, after they'd debated the merits of various observation techniques for 15 uninterrupted minutes. May I confess something? I would prefer honesty to polite platitudes. As soon as she said it, guilt stabbed through her chest. What a hypocrite she was, asking for honesty while hiding the truth of their meeting. This has been the most genuinely enjoyable conversation I've had in months, possibly years. You're not angling for anything, not positioning yourself advantageously, not calculating social benefit. You're just yourself. Do you have any idea how rare that is? The guilt intensified, threatening to choke her. She opened her mouth. She should tell him now, right now, that Georgiana had orchestrated this, that she'd come armed with information about his interests, that she knew about his father's death and his loneliness and his 7 readings of Principia. She should. Devonshire. Just the man I wanted to see. A portly gentleman in a badly fitted coat materialized at Edward's elbow like a malevolent spirit. Sir Thomas Littleton, Ariana realized with a sinking heart. Georgiana had mentioned him as the epitome of boring persistence. We need to discuss the mining expansion through Cornwall, Sir Thomas continued, oblivious to the tension in Edward's jaw. There's significant profit potential if we can navigate the labor concerns. Won't take but a moment. Sir Thomas, perhaps another time, Edward said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. Nonsense. These scientific fellows are all well and good for entertainment, but progress demands practical considerations. Now, as I was saying to Pemberton just yesterday. Ariana caught Edward's eye and saw genuine distress. He wanted to escape but was too polite to simply walk away. Too trapped by duty and social obligation to prioritize his own desires, just like Georgiana had described. Excuse me, Sir Thomas, Ariana interrupted smoothly. I've just remembered I promised to examine the telescopic lens display in the East Gallery before the afternoon demonstrations begin. Your Grace, would you escort me? I'm not entirely certain of the location. Relief flooded Edward's features. Of course, Lady Ariana. Sir Thomas, we'll continue this discussion another time. Good day. He offered his arm, and they escaped together, both slightly breathless from their flight. Thank you, Edward said once they'd reached a quiet alcove overlooking the Thames. Sir Thomas means well, but once he starts discussing mining investments, there's no escape short of feigning sudden illness. I noticed you looked rather desperate. That's the burden of the title. Everyone wants something. Advice, investment, influence, connections, scientific patronage. Edward's voice held an edge of exhaustion. Sometimes I feel less like a person and more like a walking repository of ducal resources. The vulnerability in his voice was unexpected. This wasn't the controlled, reserved Duke Georgiana had described. This was someone genuinely exhausted by the weight of constant demands. That sounds lonely, Ariana said quietly. Edward looked at her, surprise evident in his expression. Most people don't see it that way. They see privilege and power, not isolation. Privilege and isolation aren't mutually exclusive. You can have every material advantage and still feel utterly alone. Yes. The single word held volumes of acknowledgement. Exactly that. They stood in the alcove, the noise of the lecture fading to background murmur. Through the windows, the Thames glittered in the afternoon sun, boats gliding past like time itself made visible. Lady Ariana, Edward said slowly. I need to tell you something. Ariana's heart stopped. Had he realized? Had he somehow discovered Georgiana's scheme? I find myself in an unusual position, Edward continued. I met you, or rather, saw you, several nights ago. In my carriage. You were fleeing the Grenville Assembly. Yes. That was me. I've thought about that moment rather more than I should admit. The concern I felt when I saw someone in distress. The disappointment when you disappeared before I could help. He turned to face her fully. And now, here you are. The mysterious fleeing lady turns out to be someone I would very much like to know better. Your Grace. Edward, he interrupted. When we're discussing planetary motion and gravitational equations, I think we can dispense with excessive formality. Call me Edward. Edward, then. Her voice wavered. She should tell him. Right now. Before this went any further. Would you permit me to call on you? The question tumbled out in a rush, as if he'd been gathering courage. Properly, with your father's permission. I would very much like to continue this conversation. Perhaps over tea, where Sir Thomas Littleton cannot interrupt us with mining prospects. Ariana's heart soared even as guilt intensified. This was working exactly as Georgiana had planned. Edward was interested, engaged, clearly attracted to the connection they'd formed. And it was built on a foundation of calculated information and orchestrated circumstances. But her enjoyment had been genuine. Her interest in him was real. The connection she felt, that was authentic, wasn't it? I would like that very much, she heard herself say. Excellent. Edward's smile was transformative, pure joy breaking through aristocratic reserve. I'll call on Tuesday, if that's agreeable. Tuesday would be perfect. As they walked back toward the main lecture hall, Edward continued discussing the upcoming presentation on planetary motion, his enthusiasm infectious. Ariana listened and responded, part of her mind fully engaged in the conversation while another part screamed that she was making a terrible mistake. She should have told him. Should have confessed everything right there in the alcove. But she hadn't. And now she would have to live with that choice. If Ariana's dilemma has you on the edge of your seat, will she confess the truth, or will secrets destroy her chance at love? Then we'd be so grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything. And if you're curious about how this delicate deception will unravel, leave a comment below telling us what you think Ariana should do. We read every one. Now, let's see how guilt begins to consume her. The days between the Royal Society lecture and Edward's promised call felt like years. Ariana barely slept. When she did, she dreamed of Edward's face when he discovered the truth. Sometimes he looked betrayed. Sometimes angry. Sometimes just sad. As if she'd confirmed everything he feared about the world, that everyone wanted something, that genuine connection was impossible, that he was right to isolate himself behind duty and responsibility. Mary noticed, of course. You're not eating, my lady. And you've dark circles under your eyes that all the powder in London won't hide. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're in love with the Duke, and you're terrified he'll discover how you met. Ariana set down the book she'd been pretending to read. I don't love him. I barely know him. You know him well enough to feel guilty. And guilt that strong suggests something more than casual interest. Mary sat beside her on the window seat. Tell him, my lady. Before it goes further. Tell him the truth. And destroy any chance of what? Happiness built on lies? Mary's voice was gentle but firm. My Tom always said that anything worth having had to stand on truth. Lies might build quick, but they crumble faster. Who is Tom? Mary looked away, her expression distant. Tom was my husband. Died 4 years ago. Consumption. She took a breath. Before he passed, I lied to him about something. Something I thought would hurt him less if he didn't know. But he found out anyway, in the end. And the last weeks of his life, he couldn't trust me. Couldn't believe anything I said, because I'd proven myself a liar about one thing, so why not everything? Mary, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Learn from it. Mary gripped Ariana's hands. Tell the Duke. Tell him before Tuesday. Write him a letter if you must. But don't let him fall in love with a version of you that was created by his sister's scheming. Let him fall in love with the real you, the woman brave enough to tell the truth. Ariana thought about that conversation as she dressed for Edward's call on Tuesday. She'd written the letter Mary suggested. Sealed it. Held it in her hands for hours. She hadn't sent it. She told herself she needed to see him first. To gauge his mood. To find the right moment. But really, she was just a coward. Edward arrived precisely at 3 o'clock, as punctual as one would expect from a man who valued order and responsibility. The butler showed him into the drawing room where Ariana waited, her father discreetly present as propriety demanded, but seated far enough away to allow private conversation. Edward looked nervous. It was endearing, this powerful, composed Duke who commanded respect from Parliament and society, visibly anxious about a simple afternoon call. He brought flowers. Not the expensive hothouse roses most gentlemen favored, but winter jasmine, delicate yellow blooms that survived the frost, that thrived in harsh conditions. Lady Ariana, he bowed. Thank you for receiving me. I hope these are acceptable. I noticed them in the garden this morning and thought. He trailed off, looking uncertain. They're perfect, Ariana said softly, taking the flowers. Thank you. They managed 5 minutes of stilted pleasantries about the weather and the Royal Society lecture before Ariana couldn't bear it anymore. The guilt was eating her alive. She could see Edward trying so hard, being so genuine, opening himself to the possibility of connection after years of isolation. And all of it was built on deception. Edward, she said, interrupting his comment about recent astronomical observations. I need to tell you something. Before we continue this, whatever this is becoming, you need to know the truth. His expression shifted immediately to wariness. What truth? And so she told him. Everything. The panic-driven flight into his carriage. Georgiana waiting inside. The conversation about Edward's loneliness and Georgiana's desperation regarding Captain Fitzroy. The invitation to tea at Cavendish House. The observatory. The journal entry that had broken Ariana's heart. The Royal Society invitation that was deliberately orchestrated to throw them together. She told me about your father, Ariana said, forcing herself to meet Edward's eyes even though it hurt. About how you saved the estate but lost yourself in the process. She told me you'd read Principia 7 times. She told me exactly what topics would interest you, what rescue you'd need from Sir Thomas Littleton, how to engage you in conversation. Edward's face had gone very still. I see. She wanted me to distract you. To make you happy enough that you'd approve her match with Captain Fitzroy. To prove that you could open your heart again, so you'd stop being so protective of her. Ariana's voice cracked. I knew it was wrong. I knew I should refuse. But I was desperate too, fleeing Viscount Montague, 3 seasons with no acceptable offers, my father losing patience. And the thought of meeting someone who might actually value my mind. So this was a conspiracy. Each word was precisely enunciated, controlled fury barely contained beneath ducal composure. My sister decided to manipulate my romantic life to serve her own purposes, and you agreed to be her instrument. It wasn't like that. Wasn't it? Edward stood abruptly, moving toward the window. Let me guess the sequence of events. Georgiana invited you to tea. She gave you information about my interests, my preferences, my vulnerabilities. She secured your invitation to the Royal Society lecture, an event she knew I would attend. She coached you on exactly what to say to capture my attention. The accuracy of his summary was damning. Ariana felt tears burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. Yes, she said quietly. All of that happened. I won't lie to you about it. How thoughtful. Honesty after the deception has already served its purpose. He moved to the fireplace, his back rigid with anger. Tell me, Lady Ariana, was any of it real? Our conversation about planetary motion, your interest in astronomy, or were you just performing your role in my sister's little theatrical? My interest was genuine. Everything I said about astronomy, about gravitational theory, about my own passions, that was all true. Georgiana didn't tell me what opinions to have. She just gave me context. Information that helped me understand you better. Information that you used to manipulate me into believing we had some kind of genuine connection. We did have a genuine connection. Ariana stood, moving toward him though she didn't dare touch him. Yes, Georgiana told me what topics would interest you, but our conversation went far beyond anything she could have scripted. The way we challenged each other's ideas, the intellectual excitement of finding someone who truly understood, that was real, Edward. That was us, not her scheme. How can I possibly know what was real and what was calculated? He turned from the fireplace, and the hurt in his eyes broke her heart. Every word you said, every opinion you expressed, every moment I thought we were truly connecting, it's all tainted now. I don't know if I was falling for you or for a performance carefully designed to exploit my loneliness. You were falling for me. The real me. Ariana crossed the room, stopping just in front of him. Yes, I came to that lecture knowing what topics might interest you. But everything after that, every laugh, every debate, every moment of genuine recognition, that was authentic. Georgiana gave me a doorway, but I walked through it as myself. As Ariana, not as some character playing a role. And I'm supposed to simply trust that? Trust the woman who's just admitted to deceiving me from the very beginning? No. Ariana's voice broke. You're supposed to be furious with me. You're supposed to feel betrayed and manipulated, because you were. What Georgiana and I did was wrong. I should have told you immediately at the lecture, or certainly before today. I should never have agreed to the scheme in the first place. Then why did you? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with accusation and genuine curiosity. Because I was lonely too. The words burst out, raw and honest. Because I've spent an entire season being courted by men who only see my dowry and family connections. Because no one has ever asked what actually interests me or valued my opinions on anything substantive. Because when Georgiana described you, a man who might appreciate intelligence and genuine conversation, I was desperate enough to compromise my ethics for a chance at real connection. She turned away, unable to bear looking at his face anymore. I'm not defending what I did. It was manipulative and wrong, and you have every right to walk out of here and never speak to me again. But Edward, please believe this one thing. My feelings became real. Somewhere between discussions of gravitational anomalies and your passion for supporting astronomical research, I fell in love with you. Not the Duke, you. The man who gets passionate about parallax measurements and carries the weight of legacy with such grace. The man who's lonely and brilliant and desperately in need of someone who sees him rather than his title. The silence stretched unbearably. Ariana heard the clock on the mantel ticking, each second an eternity. Why tell me now? Edward asked finally. You could have continued the deception. I was clearly infatuated enough not to question too closely. You could have secured the engagement, the marriage, everything Georgiana wanted for both of us. Why confess? Because I couldn't build a life with you on a foundation of lies. Because you deserve honesty, even when it costs me everything I've begun to want. Ariana finally let the tears fall. Because I'd rather lose you now with my integrity intact than keep you through continued deception and lose myself in the process. She heard him move, felt him step closer behind her. Then his hands were on her shoulders, turning her gently to face him. "You're crying," he said, and there was wonder in his voice rather than anger. "Of course I'm crying. I've just destroyed any chance of happiness with the first man who's ever truly seen me. I'm allowed to cry about that." "The first man who's ever truly seen you," Edward repeated slowly. "Is that really how you see me?" "That's how I know you. Not from Georgiana's information, but from our conversation. From the way you listen to my opinions about gravitational theory as if they mattered. From how your whole face changes when you talk about something you love. From the vulnerability you showed when you admitted feeling like a walking repository of ducal resources." She reached up, touching his face gently with trembling fingers. "I know you, Edward Cavendish. Maybe I took a shortcut to meeting you. Maybe the circumstances were manipulative and wrong. But what happened after that? What's happening between us right now? This is real. This is honest. This is me, completely without artifice, telling you that I love you, and I'm desperately sorry for how badly I've handled everything." Edward caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. His eyes searched hers, looking for truth, for authenticity, for some assurance that he wasn't being played for a fool. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Terrified to trust this. Terrified that I'm just seeing what I want to see because I'm so bloody lonely that I'd rather believe a beautiful lie than face another decade of isolation." "Then don't trust me yet. Let me prove it to you." Ariana's voice strengthened with determination. "Give me a chance to show you who I really am. No scripts, no information from Georgiana, no strategic conversation management. Just me, honestly and completely, for as long as it takes for you to believe that what we have is genuine." "And what about my sister's scheme? Her plans for Captain Fitzroy?" "I don't know. That's between you and Georgiana. I can't solve your family dynamics. I can only be honest about my own role in them." Edward was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Finally, he spoke. "I need time," he said quietly. "Time to think. To process this. To determine if I can trust what I feel versus what might have been manufactured." Ariana's heart sank, but she nodded. "I understand. Do you?" His voice wasn't unkind, but it was distant. "I've spent 10 years rebuilding my family's reputation, learning to trust my judgment again after father's disasters. And now I discover that the first genuine connection I thought I'd made was partially orchestrated by my meddling sister. That's not something I can simply forgive in an afternoon." "I know." Ariana stepped back, removing her hand from his. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Honestly, completely, waiting for whatever you decide." Edward moved toward the door, then paused. "Ariana." "Yes?" "Thank you for telling me. For choosing honesty even when it cost you. That." He paused, as if searching for words. "That means something. I don't know what yet, but it means something." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with quiet finality. Ariana stood in the drawing room, tears streaming down her face, the winter jasmine still clutched in her hands. From across the room, her father rose from his chair and came to embrace her. "You did the right thing, my dear," Charles Fairfax said softly. "The difficult thing, but the right thing." "Then why does it hurt so much?" "Because doing the right thing often does. But you can live with the pain of honesty. You couldn't have lived with the rot of deception." Ariana clung to her father and wept for what she'd found and lost in the space of a week. For Edward's hurt face. For the connection they'd had and might never have again. For the woman she'd been willing to become in her desperation, and the woman she'd chosen to be instead, even though it cost her everything. Outside, she heard Edward's carriage pull away, wheels crunching on the gravel drive. She'd done the right thing. She just hoped the right thing wouldn't destroy them both. 3 days passed like 3 years. Ariana barely left her room. Mary brought meals she couldn't eat. Letters arrived from acquaintances, some concerned, most gleefully scandalized. Lady Pemberton's note was particularly cutting, such a shame about the Duke. But these hasty attachments so rarely work out, don't they? One wonders what could have gone wrong so quickly. Perhaps His Grace simply realized certain incompatibilities. The implication was clear. Ariana was unsuitable, reaching above her station, presumptuous in thinking a duke might genuinely care for an earl's daughter. The worst was her father. Charles Fairfax said nothing about Edward's abrupt departure or Ariana's tear-swollen eyes, but his silence was deafening. She'd disappointed him. Again. 3 seasons without an acceptable match. Public scandal at the Grenville Assembly. And now this, whatever this was. A potential connection with a duke, squandered through some mystery transgression she hadn't confided even to her father. On the 4th day, Viscount Montague sent another letter requesting to call. This time, her father didn't refuse immediately. He brought the letter to Ariana's room himself, his face grave. "My dear," he said gently, sitting on the edge of her bed where she lay staring at the ceiling, "I know Montague isn't ideal. But you're 3 seasons in, and after this, situation with the Duke." "What situation?" Ariana asked dully. "I rejected no one. He simply decided we wouldn't suit. The gossip says otherwise." Her father's voice was careful, concerned. "They're saying you entrapped him. That you schemed your way into his affections at the Royal Society, then he discovered your true nature. Your reputation, Ariana, is ruined." "I know. Not ruined. Not yet. But without a respectable match soon, without someone willing to overlook the whispers." He trailed off, but the message was clear. "You think I should accept Montague. I think you should consider him. The man's persistent, and his title is respectable. His age is unfortunate, and the circumstances of his late wife's death are admittedly troubling. But he can provide security. Protection from scandal." "Protection from scandal," Ariana repeated. She thought of Montague's clammy hands, his tobacco-stained teeth, the way he'd grabbed her wrist at the Grenville Assembly. She thought of becoming the 4th Lady Montague, joining the ranks of mysteriously deceased wives. That's what my life has come to. Choosing between scandal and horror. I'm not saying you must decide today. But Ariana. Her father took her hand. "I cannot protect you forever from society's judgment. At some point, you'll need to make a choice. Even if it's not the choice you wanted." After he left, Ariana lay in the darkness and thought about choices. She'd chosen honesty over deception. Truth over security. And what had it earned her? Edward's hurt face. Her reputation in tatters. Viscount Montague circling like a vulture, waiting for her desperation to overcome her revulsion. Maybe she should have kept Georgiana's secret. Maybe honesty was a luxury she couldn't afford. Underscore 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 underscore. Meanwhile, across London in Belgravia, Edward sat alone in his study, Ariana's confession replaying in his mind like a nightmare he couldn't wake from. He'd read her words 100 times since leaving Grosvenor Square. "I fell in love with you." The man who gets passionate about parallax measurements and carries the weight of legacy with such grace. Had she meant it? Or was that just another layer of manipulation, designed to keep him confused, to prevent him from simply walking away? His mother's portrait watched him from the wall. Lady Margaret Cavendish had died when he was 16, before father's financial disaster, before the weight of the dukedom had crushed everything else out of his life. What would she tell him now? He remembered her voice, patient and wise. "Edward, my darling, people are not mathematical proofs. They're messy and complicated and they make mistakes. The question isn't whether they err, but whether they learn from those errors. And whether they have the courage to admit them." Ariana had admitted hers. She'd confessed when she could have kept silent. She'd risked everything, his regard, her reputation, any chance at a respectable marriage, for the sake of honesty. That took courage. Real courage, not the social variety that ladies demonstrated by choosing between ribbon colors. But could he trust her? Could he trust anyone after this? He thought of their conversation at the Royal Society. The way her face lit up when discussing planetary motion. The laugh that had surprised him with its genuine delight. The moment she'd rescued him from Sir Thomas Littleton with such perfect timing, not because Georgiana had told her to, but because she'd seen his distress and acted on instinct. Had any of it been real? Yes, something in his chest insisted. The connection was real. The manipulation was just the doorway. What you built after stepping through, that was genuine. But his mind countered, how can you know? How can you ever be certain? He picked up his pen and began to write. Not to Ariana, he wasn't ready for that. But to Captain Thomas Fitzroy, the man whose very existence had prompted Georgiana's desperate scheme. Captain Fitzroy. I have been unfair to you. I have judged your suit for my sister's hand based on fear rather than fact, on my own wounds rather than your worth. Recent events have made me question my judgment in many matters. I propose we meet. Properly. Without my preconceptions or your desperation. Let us see if you are the man Georgiana believes you to be, or if I was right to worry. I make no promises beyond listening. But I owe you, and my sister, that much. Edward Cavendish, Duke of Devonshire. He sealed the letter and sent it with a footman. Then he climbed the stairs to his observatory, to the telescope that still pointed toward heaven, and tried to find in the stars some answer to the chaos in his heart. Georgiana sat in her bedroom at Cavendish House, staring at the letter from Thomas that had arrived that morning. Dearest Georgiana. Your brother has written to me. He's invited me to dinner next week, a proper meeting to discuss our future. I can hardly believe it. I don't know what changed his mind. Perhaps time, perhaps wisdom, perhaps something else entirely. But this is our chance, my love. Our chance to prove that what we have is real and worth fighting for. I'll make him see. I'll make him understand that I would die before dishonoring you, that my love isn't diminished by my second son status or my naval career. That you deserve to make your own choices about happiness. Whatever prompted Edward's change of heart, I'm grateful for it. All my love. Thomas. Georgiana set the letter down with trembling hands. Edward had agreed to meet Thomas. After months of refusal, after all her begging and arguing, he'd finally agreed. Because of Ariana's confession. Because whatever pain the truth had caused, it had also shaken Edward out of his rigid certainty, made him question his own judgment, opened a door that had been sealed shut. But at what cost? Georgiana picked up the letter she'd received from Ariana 2 days prior. Lady Georgiana. I've told Edward everything. About your scheme, about the information you gave me, about my role in manipulating his affections. He's hurt and angry, and I don't know if he'll ever forgive either of us. You meant well. I believe that. You love your brother and wanted his happiness. But we were wrong, Georgiana. Wrong to think we could orchestrate someone's heart. Wrong to treat Edward's vulnerability as a puzzle to be solved rather than pain to be respected. I hope you get your chance with Captain Fitzroy. I hope Edward finds it in his heart to see Thomas's worth. But if he does, let it be because Thomas earned it, not because I manipulated Edward into a more forgiving mood. I can't be part of this anymore. Whatever happens between Edward and me now will be honest, or it will be nothing at all. Ariana. Tears streamed down Georgiana's face. She'd gotten what she wanted. Edward was finally willing to meet Thomas. But she'd broken her brother's trust. And she'd hurt Ariana, who'd been brave enough to tell the truth even when that truth destroyed her own happiness. "I'm sorry," Georgiana whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." A knock at her door. "Edward. May I come in?" She nodded, unable to speak. Edward entered, his face showing the exhaustion of sleepless nights. He held 2 letters, hers to Ariana, and Ariana's reply. She'd left them on his desk that morning, her own confession. "I've written to Captain Fitzroy," Edward said quietly. "I've invited him to dinner next week. I'll give him the meeting I should have given him months ago." Georgiana's heart soared. "Edward." "But Georgiana," his voice was steel beneath silk, "what you did was unconscionable. You manipulated my life, Ariana's life, your own future, without regard for anyone's feelings but your own desires. You treated us all like pieces in a game." I know, and I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough." Edward sat across from her, and his eyes held a pain she'd never seen before. "You're my sister. I love you more than anyone in this world. I've dedicated 10 years to protecting you, providing for you, ensuring your future. And you repaid that love by scheming behind my back, by assuming I was too broken or too stupid to find happiness on my own. I didn't think you were broken or stupid. I thought you were lonely. I thought you deserved someone who could see you the way I see you, as more than just the Duke. Then you should have said that. You should have talked to me, argued with me, even fought with me openly. But you shouldn't have manipulated me." Edward's voice cracked. "Do you understand what you've cost me, Georgiana? I met someone extraordinary. Someone who shared my passions, who made me feel alive again after years of just existing. And now I can't trust my own feelings because I don't know what was real and what was orchestrated by you." "It was real," Georgiana said desperately. "I gave Ariana information, yes. But everything that happened between you was genuine. The connection you felt, that was real, Edward. I didn't create that. I just gave it an opportunity to exist. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to play God with people's hearts and then claim credit when they happen to fall in love despite your meddling." They sat in silence, the weight of Edward's hurt and Georgiana's guilt filling the space between them. "I'll meet with Thomas," Edward said finally. "I'll give him a fair hearing, as I should have done from the start. But Georgiana, you and I need to establish new boundaries. You cannot manipulate my life again. Ever. If you disagree with my decisions, we discuss them. Directly. Honestly. No more schemes. I promise. I swear it, Edward. I never meant to hurt you. I know you didn't. That's the only reason I'm still speaking to you." Edward stood, moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, you weren't entirely wrong. Ariana is extraordinary. And if I can ever trust what I feel again, if I can separate the genuine connection from the manufactured circumstances, she might be exactly what I needed. Are you going to forgive her?" "I don't know yet. But she was brave enough to tell me the truth even when it cost her everything. That counts for something." After he left, Georgiana sat alone with her guilt and her hope warring in her chest. She'd gotten what she wanted, Edward would meet Thomas. But she'd hurt the 2 people who mattered most. She picked up her pen and began writing to Ariana. An apology. A real one this time, without justification or excuse. Just acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused and the hope that somehow, despite everything, both her brother and her friend might find their way to happiness. Even if she didn't deserve to see it. Edward's torn between trust and suspicion, Ariana's drowning in guilt and scandal, and Georgiana's scheme has left everyone wounded. If you're desperate to see how this tangle of hearts resolves, make sure you're subscribed, because the reunion is coming, and it's going to be worth every tear you've shed with these characters. Now, let's see if love can survive the weight of truth. 6 days after the confession, Ariana received a letter. Not from Edward, she'd stopped hoping for that. But from Captain Thomas Fitzroy. Lady Ariana. We have not met, but your name has been mentioned in recent correspondence with Lady Georgiana and, more recently, with the Duke of Devonshire. I understand you've been caught in circumstances not entirely of your making, and that you've demonstrated considerable courage in extricating yourself honorably. As someone who values honesty above nearly all other virtues, I wanted to express my respect for your actions. The Duke has agreed to meet with me next Tuesday. Lady Georgiana credits your influence, though she's not entirely certain how that influence manifested. I suspect the truth is more complex and more painful than she realizes. Whatever transpired between you and His Grace, thank you for helping him see that people, even his sister, even himself, deserve the chance to make their own choices about love. * Your servant. Captain Thomas Fitzroy, Royal Navy. Ariana read the letter twice, then set it aside. So Edward was meeting with Thomas. Was that because of her confession, or despite it? Had her honesty opened his heart, or had it simply made him question his own judgment about everything? She'd never know. And perhaps that was how it should be. That afternoon, as Ariana sat in the morning room pretending to do needlework while actually calculating orbital mechanics in her head, Mary burst in. "My lady. The Duke of Devonshire is here. He's asked to speak with you." "Your father said." Ariana was already moving, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. She pressed one hand to her stomach, trying to calm the chaos inside her. Edward stood in the entrance hall, looking as exhausted and uncertain as she felt. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, years of loneliness and days of anguish written in both their faces. "Your Grace," she whispered. "May we speak? Privately?" His voice was formal, controlled, giving nothing away. Ariana nodded. They moved to the drawing room, and she closed the door behind them. Propriety be damned, she needed to hear whatever he'd come to say without the buffer of her father's presence. Edward didn't sit. He stood by the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. "I've been thinking," he said abruptly. "For 6 days, I've done nothing but think. About what you did. About what Georgiana did. About what I felt that day at the Royal Society." Ariana's heart pounded. And I realized something." Edward turned to face her, and his eyes held a complexity of emotion she couldn't parse. "You could have kept silent. Even after I asked to call on you, even after we'd begun developing a genuine connection, you could have continued the deception. You could have let me fall completely, secured my proposal, married me with me none the wiser. I would never have known. We could have lived our entire lives with you harboring that secret, and I would have died believing our love was pure and spontaneous." "I couldn't lie to you," Ariana said quietly. "Not about something that important." "Exactly." Edward stepped closer. "My father used to say that integrity isn't perfection. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about honesty when honesty is hardest, when the truth costs you everything you want. You chose honesty when it would have been infinitely easier, infinitely safer, to stay silent. So you understand? I understand that you were in an impossible position. Desperate enough to accept Georgiana's scheme initially, but moral enough to confess when it became real." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Ariana's breath stopped. "I understand that for 6 days, I've been miserable. Not just hurt or angry, but genuinely, bone-deep miserable. And it's not because you deceived me initially. It's because you're not here. Because I can't talk to you about the new calculations I'm working on, or argue with you about observational techniques, or just exist in your presence." "Edward. Let me finish." His voice was shaking now, the ducal composure cracking to reveal the man beneath. "I've spent 6 days trying to convince myself that what we had was manufactured. That Georgiana's information made you able to fake a connection that wasn't real. But Ariana, I can't make myself believe that. Because the woman I met at the Royal Society, the woman who debated gravitational theory and rescued me from Sir Thomas Littleton and looked at my telescope with such wonder, that woman wasn't performing. She was just being herself. And I fell in love with her. Tears streamed down Ariana's face, but she was smiling now, hope blooming in her chest like sunrise. "I have a speech prepared for later," Edward said, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Something formal and appropriate for your father's approval. But right now, here, I just want to ask you plainly, Ariana Fairfax, will you marry me? Not because Georgiana schemed, not because society expects it, not because we're both lonely and desperate. But because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Because you make me remember who I was before I became the Duke. Because you're the first person in 10 years who's made me want to look up at the stars again." Ariana was crying, nodding, reaching for him all at once. "Yes. Yes, of course yes." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the controlled, careful Duke of Devonshire she'd met at the Royal Society. It was raw and desperate and honest, and when they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "I'm still hurt," Edward said against her hair. "I'm still working through the betrayal of Georgiana's manipulation. But Ariana, you were brave enough to tell me the truth even when it threatened everything. That's the kind of integrity I want in my life. In my wife." "I don't deserve you," Ariana whispered. "Perhaps not. But you've earned me." Edward pulled back, opening the small box to reveal an emerald ring that caught the afternoon light beautifully. "This was my mother's. She died when I was 16, before." He swallowed hard. "Before I forgot how to be Edward instead of the Duke. I think she would have liked you. I think she would have appreciated your courage." Ariana held out her trembling hand, and Edward slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all this time. "There will still be a formal proposal," Edward said, his voice regaining some of its composure. "Tonight, with your father present and all the proper protocols observed. But this moment right here, this is just for us. The real us, without schemes or audiences or anything except honest love." "Thank you," Ariana whispered. "For giving me, for giving us, another chance. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth, even when it cost you everything." They stood together in the drawing room, holding each other as afternoon sun streamed through the windows. Outside, London continued its relentless pace, carriages rolling past, gossip spreading, society judging. But inside this room, two lonely people had found each other despite impossible odds and incompetent meddling and their own fears. It wasn't the perfect love story Georgiana had imagined. It was better. Because it was built on honesty, forged in the fire of confession and forgiveness, tempered by the courage it took to be vulnerable when vulnerability seemed impossible. "I have one condition," Edward said suddenly. Ariana pulled back, worried. "What condition?" "Georgiana is planning to be unbearably smug about this entire situation. She'll claim her scheme worked, that we're together because of her brilliant matchmaking." Edward's expression turned mischievous. "We must never, under any circumstances, allow her that satisfaction." Ariana laughed, bright and genuine. "Agreed. As far as Georgiana is concerned, we fell in love despite her interference, not because of it." "Good. I'll inform her of this at dinner tonight." "Dinner tonight?" "Yes. I'm inviting Captain Fitzroy to meet the family. Georgiana should be there too, to face the consequences of her actions while also getting what she wanted." Edward smiled. "Fair is fair, after all. She hurt us, but she also loves us. That has to count for something." "You're a better person than I am," Ariana said softly. "No. I'm just someone who's been given a second chance at happiness. I'm not going to waste it nursing grudges." He kissed her forehead. "Now, I believe I owe your father a formal conversation about my intentions toward his daughter. Shall we face him together?" "Together," Ariana agreed. And as they walked hand in hand to find Charles Fairfax, Ariana felt the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. Yes, they'd begun with deception. Yes, the road had been painful. But they'd emerged on the other side honest and whole and ready to build something real. Sometimes the wrong carriage did lead to the right destination. You just had to be brave enough to tell the truth along the way. That evening, Cavendish House glowed with candlelight and nervous energy. Ariana arrived with her parents, her hand unconsciously reaching for the emerald ring now adorning her finger. Edward had made the formal proposal that afternoon in front of her father, had endured Charles Fairfax's stern questioning about his intentions and his ability to appreciate a wife with scientific interests. The Earl had ultimately given his blessing, though not without a pointed comment about the peculiarity of the entire courtship. Most engagements don't involve elaborate confessions of guilt, Charles had said dryly. But I suppose in your case, my daughter's moral integrity outweighs conventional romance. Now, walking into the Duke's residence as his acknowledged fiancé rather than a pawn in his sister's scheme, Ariana felt the surreality of the situation hit her again. Georgiana waited in the drawing room, wearing a gown of pale pink silk and an expression of nervous hope. When she saw Ariana, she stood abruptly. Ariana. I didn't know if you'd come. I wasn't sure myself, Ariana admitted. But Edward asked me to. And I owed you a conversation, at least. They stood awkwardly for a moment before Georgiana rushed forward and embraced her. I'm so sorry. I'm so desperately, terribly sorry. I was selfish and manipulative, and I hurt you both in pursuit of my own happiness. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Probably not, Ariana agreed, but she returned the embrace. But I understand what it's like to be desperate. To want something so badly that you compromise your own ethics. I can't condemn you for doing what I ultimately agreed to participate in. You confessed, though. You were brave enough to tell the truth even when it destroyed everything. I just kept scheming. You wrote to Edward. You sent him our letters, my confession. That took courage too. Georgiana pulled back, wiping her eyes. Is Edward? He's forgiven us both. Mostly. We're engaged. Georgiana's face transformed with joy. Ariana, that's wonderful. She stopped, seeing something in Ariana's expression. But you're not entirely happy about it. I am happy. Deliriously so. I worry that our foundation is cracked. That we'll always question whether what we have is real or just Stockholm Syndrome for mutual deception. It's real, came Edward's voice from the doorway. He entered, resplendent in evening dress, and moved immediately to Ariana's side. We've been over this, love. Stop letting doubt poison what we've built. Yes, Your Grace, Ariana said with mock meekness, but she leaned into his side. The butler announced another arrival, Captain Thomas Fitzroy. The man who entered was not what Ariana had expected. She'd imagined someone rough, weathered by naval service. Instead, Captain Fitzroy was surprisingly elegant, tall and broad-shouldered, yes, but with an intelligent face and warm brown eyes that immediately found Georgiana across the room. Your Grace, he bowed to Edward. Thank you for receiving me. Captain Fitzroy. Edward's voice was carefully neutral. Thank you for coming. May I introduce my fiancée, Lady Ariana Fairfax? Lady Ariana. Thomas bowed, but his eyes held knowing humor. So you're the lady whose courage started this entire chain of events. Georgiana's told me a great deal about you. Mostly that you're far too intelligent to be marrying her brother. Edward raised an eyebrow. I'm standing right here, Fitzroy. Are you? I hadn't noticed. Too busy admiring the woman who had the backbone to tell you the truth even when it might cost her everything. Thomas's grin was infectious, his tone simultaneously teasing and genuine. That's officer material, that is. We could use someone like her in the Navy. You're not recruiting my fiancé, Edward said dryly. Pity. Well then, Your Grace, shall we proceed with the interrogation? I understand you have concerns about my suitability for your sister's hand. I thought we could organize the objections alphabetically. A. I'm away at sea for months at a time. B. I have debts, though honorable ones, inherited from my late father's poor investments. C. I could die in battle tomorrow, leaving Georgiana a widow before she's 20. D. Georgiana interrupted quietly, her eyes shining with tears and love, you're the only man I've ever loved. The only man who makes me feel like myself instead of just the Duke's sister. The only man who makes me laugh when I want to cry and challenges me when I want to hide. Thomas's expression softened immediately. He crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands. Well, when you put it that way, how can any rational man object? I can object in many rational ways, Edward said, but his tone had gentled. Please, Captain, sit. We have much to discuss. The dinner that followed was unlike any Ariana had attended. There was laughter, genuine laughter, as Thomas regaled them with naval stories that were both thrilling and self-deprecating. He spoke of his ship, the HMS Resolute, and his crew with obvious affection. He didn't hide his limited finances or the danger of his profession, but neither did he apologize for them. I will promise Lady Georgiana an easy life, Thomas said during a lull in conversation. His face was serious now, all humor set aside. The Navy is dangerous, Your Grace. My income is modest, enough to keep her comfortable but not in the style to which she's accustomed. We'd live in naval housing when I'm ashore, and she'd spend months alone when I'm at sea. If I'm promoted, conditions improve. If I die. He swallowed hard. If I die, she'd be left a widow with a modest pension. But you'd love her, Ariana found herself saying. Genuinely, completely, without reservation. Yes. Thomas looked at Georgiana, and the emotion in his face was unmistakable. I'd love her with everything I have, for as long as I have it to give. Which admittedly might not be long, naval service is precarious. But I'd give her honesty, fidelity, and partnership. I'd treat her as an equal, not a possession. And I'd spend every day trying to deserve her. Edward set down his wine glass. Captain Fitzroy, I have been unfair to you. I judged you based on fear rather than character, on my own wounds rather than your worth. I've spent 10 years trying to protect my sister from life itself, and in doing so, I've nearly suffocated her. Edward, Georgiana started. Let me finish. Edward turned to his sister, and his expression was pained. Georgiana, I love you more than anyone in this world. When father died and left chaos behind, protecting you became my reason for existing. But somewhere in that protection, I forgot that you're not a child anymore. You're a woman capable of making your own choices, and accepting their consequences. He turned back to Thomas. If Georgiana chooses you, knowing the risks, knowing the hardships, knowing she may lose you to the sea or to war, that's her choice to make. Not mine to prevent. Does that mean, Georgiana's voice was barely a whisper. It means I'm giving my blessing. With conditions. Edward's tone turned stern. You'll court properly, with full supervision. 6 months minimum before any engagement is announced. During that time, Captain Fitzroy will demonstrate fiscal responsibility by managing the Northumberland estate. I need a steward there, and it will prove your ability to handle land matters as well as naval ones. I'd be honored, Your Grace, Thomas said immediately. If at the end of 6 months, you both still wish to marry, I'll not stand in your way. Edward paused, then added quietly, I might even dance at your wedding. Georgiana burst into tears and threw herself at her brother. Edward caught her, holding tight, and over her shoulder, his eyes met Ariana's. In them, she saw gratitude, for the push her confession had given him, for the courage she'd modeled, for the reminder that honesty and vulnerability weren't weaknesses but strengths. Thank you, Georgiana sobbed into Edward's shoulder. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank Ariana, Edward said quietly. She's the one who taught me that people deserve to make their own mistakes. That love is worth risking. That sometimes the best protection is letting go. Georgiana pulled back and moved to Ariana, embracing her fiercely. You saved us. Both of us. Edward and me. I nearly destroyed you both, Ariana corrected gently. But perhaps that destruction was necessary. Sometimes you have to break something to rebuild it properly. The rest of the dinner passed in a warm haze of plans and laughter. Thomas regaled them with more naval adventures. Edward and Charles discussed the Northumberland stewardship. Georgiana glowed with a happiness Ariana had never seen in her, the kind that came from being truly seen and chosen, not hidden and protected. As the evening drew to a close and Ariana prepared to leave with her parents, Edward pulled her aside into the library. "I have something for you," he said. "A betrothal gift, though not a traditional one." He handed her a leather-bound journal, new, the pages blank. "I want you to start your own astronomical observations," Edward explained. "Document them here. Your theories, your calculations, your discoveries. And when we marry, we'll publish them together. Not as Edward Cavendish and wife, but as Edward and Ariana Cavendish, equal partners in scientific inquiry." Ariana's throat closed with emotion. "Edward, that's extraordinary. Most gentlemen would expect their wives to abandon such pursuits." "Most gentlemen are fools," Edward said, echoing his words from their first meeting. "You're brilliant, Ariana. Why would I want you to be anything less than everything you are?" She kissed him then, there in his library surrounded by books and charts and the accumulated knowledge of centuries. And in that kiss was a promise that they would build something real, something honest, something worth the pain it had taken to create. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too," he replied. Honestly, completely, without artifice or doubt. Outside the library, they could hear Georgiana's delighted laugh as Thomas said something outrageous. Charles Fairfax's bemused chuckle. The ordinary sounds of family and joy and love. They had begun with deception. They had nearly ended in disaster. But they had emerged with something better than either had dreamed possible. Sometimes the wrong carriage did lead to the right destination. You just had to be brave enough to tell the truth along the way. If your heart is full after that reunion, imagine how sweet the epilogue is going to be. But first, if this story has touched you, if you've been rooting for Ariana and Edward from that first terrified flight into the wrong carriage, we'd be so grateful if you'd take just a second to like this video and leave a comment telling us your favorite moment. Your engagement truly means the world to us. Now, let's skip ahead 1 year and see how love has transformed everyone. The nursery at Devonshire Hall in Derbyshire was flooded with late afternoon sunlight, illuminating the newly installed observatory windows that Ariana had insisted upon. She stood by one of those windows now, cradling their infant son William, while Edward attempted to explain stellar motion to their utterly uninterested 3-month-old. "You see, William, the apparent movement of the stars is actually caused by Earth's rotation around its axis," Edward said with complete seriousness, pointing to a chart he'd hung on the nursery wall. Without understanding this fundamental principle, celestial navigation becomes impossible, and one cannot properly calculate. "Darling, he's asleep," Ariana interrupted, smiling. Edward looked down at their son, whose tiny face was peaceful in sleep, completely oblivious to his father's lecture. "Ah. Well, we'll continue the lesson later. It's never too early to begin a proper scientific education." "He has his entire life to learn about stellar motion," Ariana said, crossing to sit beside her husband on the settee. "For now, perhaps we could simply enjoy him being small and perfect." "He is rather perfect, isn't he?" Edward's voice held wonder as he gently touched William's tiny hand. "I still can't quite believe we made him." "I assure you we did. I have extensive memories of the process. Particularly the final hours, which I'm told involved a great deal of screaming and threats of violence against your person." "Which I bore with admirable patience and concern," Edward said dryly. "Though the midwife did suggest I might be more helpful outside the room." "You refused to leave." "Of course I refused. You were bringing our son into the world. Where else would I be?" Ariana leaned against him, careful not to jostle the sleeping infant. "I love you. I love you too. Though I admit I'm somewhat distressed that William seems to have inherited your stubborn streak." "My stubborn streak?" This from the man who insisted on reviewing 3 months of astronomical data during our wedding breakfast? That data was time-sensitive. Their bickering was interrupted by a knock at the door, and Georgiana swept in, followed by a heavily pregnant woman who could only be Mrs. Captain Thomas Fitzroy, married these past 6 months and radiantly happy despite being constantly uncomfortable. "Don't get up," Georgiana said, settling carefully into a chair. I'm massive and ungainly, but I'm determined to visit my nephew. Hello, darling William. Your Aunt Georgiana has arrived to spoil you outrageously. He's asleep, Edward pointed out. Perhaps save the spoiling for later. Sleeping babies are the best kind. They can't protest when you admire them excessively. Georgiana gazed at William with open affection. He has your eyes, Edward. And Ariana's nose. Perfect combination. We think so, Ariana said, smiling at her sister-in-law. How are you feeling? The baby must be due soon. 3 weeks, according to the physician. 3 weeks of waddling, constant backache, and Thomas treating me like I'm made of spun glass. But her expression was soft with love. Though I must admit, he's been wonderful. Utterly devoted, and only slightly panicked about impending fatherhood. Where is Thomas? Edward asked. Discussing estate management with your steward. He's determined to prove he can handle the Northumberland properties flawlessly before the baby arrives. Which he's already done, but you know how Thomas is about proving himself. He's done excellent work, Edward admitted. Far better than I expected, if I'm honest. The accounts are impeccable, and the tenants speak highly of him. He's proven himself more than worthy of managing that estate permanently. You mean that? Georgiana's eyes welled with tears. Pregnancy hormones, she claimed, though Ariana suspected it was genuine emotion. You'll let him keep the position? He's earned it. And you'll need the income and the stability once the baby arrives. Edward's expression softened. You were right, Georgiana. About Thomas. About his character and his worth. I was wrong to judge him without meeting him properly. You were scared, Georgiana said gently. Scared of losing me the way you lost father. I understand that now. I should have understood it then, instead of scheming like a fool. Your scheming brought us Ariana, Edward pointed out. So it wasn't entirely foolish. Misguided and manipulative, certainly, but not foolish. I thought we agreed never to give Georgiana credit for our relationship, Ariana said, eyes sparkling. You're right. I misspoke. Edward cleared his throat. Georgiana, your scheming was completely unnecessary and nearly destroyed everything. Ariana and I fell in love despite your interference, not because of it. Of course you did, Georgiana said with suspicious sweetness. That's why you met at the Royal Society, where I just happened to secure Ariana an invitation. And why you were seated near each other. And why? We're not having this conversation, Edward said firmly. As far as history is concerned, Ariana and I met by chance, discovered a mutual love of astronomy, and proceeded to fall in love based entirely on our own compatible personalities and shared interests. Whatever you say, brother dear. The door opened again, and Thomas entered, his face lighting up when he saw his wife. Captain Fitzroy had proven to be everything Georgiana claimed and more, charming, capable, devoted. He'd spent the past 6 months managing the Northumberland estate with impressive skill while preparing for his next naval deployment. There you are, he said, moving immediately to Georgiana's side. I've been looking everywhere. You promised to rest after lunch. I'm resting. I'm sitting very restfully while visiting my nephew. That's not what the physician meant by rest, and you know it. But his tone was indulgent, loving. He helped her to her feet with exquisite gentleness. Come on, my love. Back to our chambers before you exhaust yourself. I'm not an invalid, Thomas. No, you're 7 months pregnant with my child, which is far more important than any invalid. He kissed her forehead. Besides, I thought we might continue that discussion about names. You promised to consider Henry for a boy. I promised to consider it. I didn't promise to agree to it. Their bickering faded as they left the room, and Ariana watched them go with a smile. They're happy, she said softly. Surprisingly so, Edward agreed. When I gave my blessing, I had doubts. The danger of his profession, the financial uncertainty. But they'd built something solid. Something real. Built on honesty from the start. Unlike us, you mean? Edward's tone was wry. We got there eventually. That's what matters. Ariana looked down at their sleeping son. William will grow up in a household where truth is valued above convenience. Where admitting mistakes is praised rather than punished. Where love is honest, even when honesty is hard. That's quite a legacy. It's the only one worth leaving. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the late afternoon sun paint the nursery in shades of gold. Through the observatory windows, Ariana could see the beginning of twilight, the first stars becoming visible in the darkening sky. I have something to show you, Ariana said suddenly. She carefully transferred William to Edward's arms, then moved to the desk by the window. The manuscript sat there, neat and professional, bound in leather, observations on stellar parallax, a mathematical analysis by Ariana Cavendish, Duchess of Devonshire. It's finished? Edward's voice held wonder. Ariana, this is. It's being published next month. The Royal Society approved it. She still couldn't quite believe it herself. They said it's the most comprehensive analysis they've seen from. She paused. Well, from anyone. Gender wasn't mentioned in the review. Edward set William gently in his cradle and pulled Ariana into his arms. I'm so proud of you. This is extraordinary. I couldn't have done it without you. The access to the observatory, the equipment, the time to conduct proper observations. She looked up at him. Most husbands would have expected me to put away my books once we married. To focus entirely on household management and motherhood. Most husbands are fools, Edward said, repeating what had become something of a motto between them. You're brilliant, Ariana. Why would I want you to be anything less than everything you are? Besides, he added with a mischievous smile, having a wife whose work is respected by the Royal Society reflects rather well on me, don't you think? So you're using me for social advancement? Absolutely. I'm terribly calculating that way. She laughed and kissed him, deep and slow and full of a year's worth of love and trust and partnership. Do you remember that first night at the Royal Society? Ariana asked when they finally broke apart. When we talked about gravitational theory and I was so guilty about Georgiana's scheme that I could barely look at you? I remember thinking you were the first person in years who'd seen me as Edward instead of as the Duke. Who engaged with my ideas rather than my title. I almost told you the truth that night. I came so close. I know. I could see it in your face. Edward smiled. I'm glad you didn't, actually. Not then. If you'd told me that first night, I would have been too angry to understand. Too hurt to see past the manipulation. But by the time you actually confessed, I'd already fallen in love with you. I knew the connection was real, whatever else might be false. That made all the difference. So you're saying Georgiana's terrible plan actually worked? I'm saying honesty transformed Georgiana's terrible plan into something genuine. Edward's expression turned serious. There's a difference, Ariana. She created an opportunity for us to meet. But we created everything that came after. The connection, the love, the trust, that was us. Our choice. Our work. Our choice, Ariana echoed. I like that. William stirred in his cradle, making the soft snuffling sounds that meant he'd wake soon and demand to be fed. Ariana moved to pick him up, and as she settled into the rocking chair by the window with her son at her breast, she felt a wave of contentment so profound it nearly brought tears to her eyes. This was what she'd been afraid she'd never have. Not just a husband and child, though those were precious beyond measure, but a partnership. A marriage built on mutual respect and genuine affection. A life where she could be both wife and scientist, mother and scholar, without having to choose. What are you thinking? Edward asked, watching her with the kind of attention he usually reserved for astronomical observations. I'm thinking about choices, Ariana said quietly. About the choice I made in your carriage a year ago, when Georgiana offered me a path to you. About the choice I made to confess, even when it might have destroyed everything. About the choice you made to forgive me, to trust me, to build something real from such a flawed beginning. And? Edward prompted gently. And I'm thinking that every choice led me here. To this room, with you and William, and a life more perfect than anything I dared imagine. Even the wrong choices, maybe especially the wrong choices, were necessary to get us here. So you don't regret it? The scheme, the deception, the pain? I regret hurting you. I regret the manipulation. But I don't regret what came after. How could I? She looked around the nursery, at the observatory windows showing the emerging stars, at the astronomical charts on the walls, at her husband watching her with such love, at their son feeding peacefully in her arms. We built this, Edward. From ashes and honesty and the courage to be vulnerable. That's worth everything it cost. Edward crossed the room and knelt beside the rocking chair, his hand gentle on William's downy head. I love you, Ariana Cavendish. I love you for your mind and your courage and your stubborn refusal to settle for anything less than truth. I love you for making me want to be more than just the Duke. I love you for giving me this. He gestured to their son, to the room, to the life they'd built together, when I thought I'd never deserve it. You deserve it, Ariana said fiercely. You deserve happiness and love and a life beyond duty. Don't ever doubt that. I won't. Not as long as you keep reminding me. As twilight deepened into night, as the stars grew brighter in the observatory windows, as their son drifted back to sleep in Ariana's arms, they sat together in the nursery at Devonshire Hall and marveled at the improbable path that had brought them here. A wrong carriage on a frozen January night. A scheming sister with good intentions and terrible methods. A confession that nearly destroyed everything. And a love that survived it all, not in spite of the truth, but because of it. Some stories begin with a lie. The best ones are reborn in truth. And this one, their story, would be told for generations, not as a fairy tale of perfect romance, but as something better. A story of real people making mistakes, choosing honesty, building love from the wreckage of deception. A story of stars and science and the transformative power of telling the truth, even when, especially when, that truth costs you everything. A story that proved, beyond any mathematical theorem or astronomical observation, that sometimes the wrong carriage leads to exactly the right destination. You just have to be brave enough to admit where you've been. And honest enough to say where you're going. And trusting enough to take someone's hand and say, come with me. Let's build something real. Together. Thank you so much for staying with us through every twist, turn, confession, and kiss of Ariana and Edward's journey. If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored if you'd subscribe to our channel. Your support means we can keep bringing you sweeping historical romances like this one. And please, leave a comment telling us what moment made your heart soar or your eyes tear up. We read every single one, and your words inspire us to write more stories worth telling. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another story from our channel. Click it and let yourself be swept away by another breathtaking romance. Maybe a Highland warrior who learns to love again. Or a scarred duke and a governess who sees past his wounds. Or a lady who disguises herself as a boy to escape scandal and falls for the earl who discovers her secret. Thank you for being here. Thank you for loving these characters as much as we do. And thank you for believing, as we do, that true love is worth every risk, every tear, and every brave choice to tell the truth. Until next time, may your own love story be honest, true, and absolutely unforgettable. From all of us at Victoria Love Tales, thank you for watching.